So I will be refuting the claim that public transportation has significant advantages over automobile transportation. And my opponent's secondary claims are public transportation relieves harm from environment, it reduces traffic congestion, and it saves money. And my response to the first claim is that he presented it as the public transportation saves 37 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. And in that same the same citation he did in American Public Transportation Association, it says that U.S. greenhouse gases from transportation represent 28% of the total U.S. emission. And of that 28% of that U.S. Emission, only 34 of that 28 accounts for automobile emission. So of course it doesn't, all transportation emission has to count from airline freight, so it doesn't really, the 34 out of 28 is just for the automobile that we're trying to compare to. And also, the shift of buses to becoming environmentally friendly, you kind of have to kind of counterclaim it as other cars are going to be also going to the environmental friendly side as well. It says here from the Journal of Transport and Land Use, automobiles have increased in fuel efficiency and decreased their emissions to the point where the average automobile uses barely more energy per passenger mile traveled and emits no more greenhouse gases per passenger mile traveled than an average bus, and bus carry the vast majority of passengers. On his secondary claim that transportation reduces congestion, in his first evidence, it says that access to bus and rail lines reduces driving by 4,400 miles household annually. And in accordance to where I'm going to find that citation, it actually involves more than that. It says that household residents living within the proximity of public transportation drive an average of 4,400 fewer miles annually compared to those with no access to public transportation. And to me, in accordance to a journal, this is a problem of access. In the journal, the journal from the same citation, which is the American Public Transportation Association, they said that nearly 60% of U.S. lives in a major metropolitan area of over 1 million, but only 8.3 of the household have access to subway service. And over 50% of Americans do not live within a quarter mile of transit stops, meaning that this is kind of the problem, not necessarily of you choosing to ride a bus, more like most of us don't really have access to that public transportation. And the less access that we have to public transportation, it kind of reinforces us to use cars, which is adding to the congestion on the streets. And last, and to also counterclaim it, a lot of the studies shown that public transportation does not really alleviate congestion. 3 studies, according to Washington Post, from American Economic Review, from World Bank study, from University of California, says that there is no link between public transit and driving. The only link that they found is land use policies that could somewhat cut it down. The third claim is that he states is public transportation saves money, and it saves it by not paying for the billions of gallons that we use annually. And also, the same argument goes to the cars that are now being converted into more economical, and does not even use gas anymore, which are all electric cars. And also, he addresses the fact that all the cost of cars are very expensive, but that doesn't really provide information of why the convenience of cars would make us want to spend that amount. And so, according to LA Times, our jobs and homes are so spread wide apart that it's impossible to get around the metropolitan area, and so having public transit is perceived as impractical and inconvenient. And he doesn't also consider the time and convenience that public transportation does not include.
All right, I think you start off well labeling the claims. I think the argument on the first point where you're talking about CO2 needs to be simplified a little bit because you get kind of caught up in the numbers here. And basically it's just, look, the amount of CO2 contributed to the atmosphere by automobiles is relatively small, and the amount of savings from public transportation is also relatively small. That's all it is. Everything else, then you can present the statistics, but you're kind of presenting the statistics and trying to make the argument as you go along, and you get lost in making that argument. I thought that you had really good evidence on that point that talked about how fuel efficiency and the way that cars are used nowadays has basically reduced the impact of passenger mile travel on CO2. I mean, you've got a very good piece of evidence on that point that addresses that issue. On the congestion issue, it was interesting to me that you saved your strongest argument for the last part of the argument, which is, again, some evidence that says it doesn't really have a significant impact on congestion. The only things that seem to have any impact on that are maybe some land use issues and planning issues, but not public transportation. The other stuff, I think, talks about access. That might be an argument that the advocate would be making. We have this problem because we don't have access to these things, and you're kind of presenting an argument that really suggests that that might be true. So I'm not sure that that first part of the response helps your argument as clearly as the second part does, which I think is much more directly contrary to the advocate's position. And then the third point is basically an extension of the first argument that says they've become more fuel efficient, so on and so forth. There is a good counterclaim here also that kind of gets buried at the end, which says, look, there is a reason that people in some parts of the world prefer cars, and that is because it's convenient and because it's a time saver in comparison to public transportation. And all you have to do is look here in Southern California, and you've got the LA Times quote that works on that. It says, look, it's just impractical for people to take a bus from Pomona to Venice every day to work. Taking a car is a pain in the butt, but it's a heck of a lot faster and more efficient, and people find it more convenient for them to do those sorts of things. So, if it doesn't have a significant impact on the environment, which you've denied on the first point, why does it matter to anybody whether or not we're on a bus or in our car? All right, thank you. Thank you all.